Hello.
Hi.
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 Hello.
I'm curious about
Building open, authentic, loving relationship.
I'm curious about jealousy.
I'm curious about polyamory.
Does it just mean that you're fucking all the time?
How can I tell my parents that my partner is already married?
I'm curious about
How do you know when you're too busy to have another relationship?
I'm curious about dominant and subordinate relationships.
I'm curious about sexual health.
How can relationships evolve with people as they grow and change?
Welcome to the Curious Fox podcast for those challenging the status quo in love, sex, and relationships. My name is Effy Blue.
And I'm Jacqueline Misla. And today is another Halloween special. We put out a call to action for Scary Relationship House of Horror Stories, and you delivered. Back in episode 89, we got creative and we turned our relationship fears into physical rooms within our personal houses of horror. And this year, in episode 173, we invited you, our amazing listeners, to do the same. So today, we're going to share listener stories, as well as 2 personal stories that reflect the current fears that we are navigating in our own relationships. Now, you may know this, Effy Blue, but this is my favorite time of year.
Do I know it?
Yeah, I think I like Halloween over all of the other holidays. I think I'm gonna put a stake in the ground and say that over Christmas, over New Year, over Thanksgiving.
Wow! Officially,
fight me about it if you don't agree. Yeah, that's an official decree. Halloween is better. That's in my opinion for me.
Better than all. It's funny because Halloween is, to me, Halloween is very American. Because what US does is, US is very good at exporting its culture through Hollywood, through media. And when I think of Halloween, I think of Hollywood movies, like B movies or like horror stories all around Halloween. And all the imagery of trick-or-treating and pumpkins and gore and costumes are all very American to me. My exposure to them have always been through TV or content until I moved to this country 12 years ago. And then I was like, oh, it is real. It is a thing. People go all out.
It's not just in the movies.
It's not just in the movie. The houses get decorated. People get decorated. Kids are all into it. It is a big deal. And it's true. Not a big deal in Europe at all. And that's changing, of course, because US is very good at exporting its culture. And it has some roots in medieval Europe. It from pagans, it comes from the Hallows Eve, and we did a whole episode on how it got turned into what it is today.
Yeah, listen to episode 189 if you want to hear Effy go through the history of how we went from that to where we are right now.
Yeah, it's like dancing in the woods to what we have right now. But in my mind, even though I know the history, it's a very American thing. And at first it was like an exaggeration, like a TV thing, and then when I moved here I was like, nope, these people love Halloween, and among all of them, you love it the best.
I know. I've been trying to think about why. I think part of it, I was gonna say part of it feels like maybe because it's not as wrapped up in consumerism, but clearly that's not true because we're buying all of our costumes. But it doesn't involve gifts. I guess it involves candy, even though now they're not supposed to be gifts, but there are now these things called boo baskets. I don't know if you're seeing this all over your TikTok. But I know that my daughter came home one day and was expecting that she was going to get a boo basket, which she is not. And that she got her friend. It's essentially just going out and buying Halloween related little things and putting it in a basket and calling it a product. Because again, we're really good at that here in the States. Taking everything and making it capitalistic. But what I do actually love about Halloween is how creative it is. Every year we each get a budget. And it's normally a budget of $40 or something. That we can get some of the supplies and then we make our costume. So this weekend we were hot gluing and painting and putting things together. So I love how creative it is. And it just feels like an invitation to pretend, to play. I continue to dress up every single year as a grown ass person. And it just lets me play. I don't know. I love it.
Dan Savage calls it straight pride.
Yeah.
So that's his thing. He just calls it straight pride. It's because for pride, we'll get to, being costumes and be happy and like dance around the streets, or being, you know, weird and wonderful. And straight people don't have that. So Dan Savage says it's what Halloween is for straight people.
Got it. And that inspires in all the sexy versions of outfits, right? Sexy nun, sexy bus driver.
There's that meme going around. Did you see that meme? It was like sexy or weirdest thing. Coop. Like, okay.
It is. I know. We'll have to put that as a story on our Instagram. That's pretty funny. Yeah. So I love that piece of it. What's interesting though is that I do not like anything scary. So I like Halloween itself, but I don't like to be scary. And none of my costumes historically have been scary. I have been like 1950s poodle skirt teenager. I've been like hobo clown. I've been Wonder Woman. Yeah, I've been like all sorts of things, but none of them. Well, yeah, true. Clowns can be scary. Hobo clowns in particular. But no, nothing really like bloody or anything like that, which my daughter every year tries to like get me to do it. But I don't like watching scary movies. I don't like jump scares. I don't like, you know, even my partner, when she was playing The Last of Us, I don't know if you've seen it. It's like, you know, mushroom zombies. I have to leave the room. Like I tell her I need to protect my spirit. Like I can't be exposed to that. I do not like being scared.
No, I hear you. I don't like being scared as well, but I'm very particular about what scares me. Like things like ghosts and things don't scare me. I guess the supernatural doesn't scare me. I think what scares me is like human on human fright. Like, I'm really not good at watching like cruelty, torture porn.
Yes.
That kind of gore. I don't love gore. So like those things I can't watch, and I don't want to immerse. Even some psychological thrillers, like I think it's like when I think what scares me the most is knowing that these stories are just stories, that they come out of a human's mind.
Yes.
And I'm scared that even though if it's not real, that it's deep in someone's psyche.
Yes.
That thought, that scene, that picture exists. Yes. And they're creating it as a piece of art, which I respect. But the fact that exists is what scares me. Like humanity scares me. And I think with Halloween, it's like all out there. You see people's like darkest imaginations, like come into like artistic expression. I'm like, I'm scared of my fellow humans.
Yeah. And I love your creativity, love the storytelling, love all that stuff. But just like the scariness, like I'm not going to go into an actual haunted house. That is not a thing I'm going to do. I'm not going to go into an actual house of horrors. No, thank you. I'm going to be outside in my clown hobo outfit. Trick-or-treating with the children. That is what I'm going to be doing.
Fair enough. Well, okay, let's just talk about fear for a second, right? Let's just, do a bit of learning like we like we're doing. Let's just talk about fear for a minute. So fear is an interesting emotion. It's a primal emotion that arises when someone or something is perceived to be dangerous, likely to cause pain or a threat. So it's very specific. And it's a bit like disgust, right? It's an evolutionary adaptive emotion to keep us safe, right? So disgust is actually in place because we don't want to eat things that aren't bad for us. So often the things that we think of are disgusting are things that are bad for us. Either like off food or things that we don't want to eat, we don't want to be near, and it keeps us safe. And fear is very much like that. It's like we're alive because there's a system, there's a function in our system that says, don't do this because you will die, right? It's dangerous. So it's actually very real, and it's a very adaptive. Almost all fears are learned. Some of them were learned by our ancestors, like many years ago. And that fear is actually being passed down from, generation to generation through evolution in our genes. And some fears we're learning here and now firsthand through experiences and development. So
that makes sense.
It's a super important emotion. And we also know there are like 3 types of fears. So there's like rational fears. So things that occur that are real, imminent, and like someone yielding a knife at you, the house is on fire and you're afraid and you're going to get out of there. Like that is a rational fear. That's good. It's going to keep us alive. And then there is primal fear. So that's the fears that have been passed through our ancestors, right? That is things like, they're like innate fears that are programmed into our brains, like fear of darkness or creepy crawlies. Like we don't really know why we're afraid, even though when we're like safe in our homes, the door is locked. We know like everyone's in place. We turn that light off, and then we get that flash of fear. And then you're like,
true.
"Oh."
You like run down the hall to the bathroom or to your yeah, exactly.
Right? So that's a primal fear. It's because we died in the dark, right? Most of our ancestors died in the dark. That's when we couldn't see. We were hunted. We don't have great eyesight as humans at night. So that's when it was, that's when we were most vulnerable. And then irrational fears, right? And those are like what we would call phobias, for example. And they don't really make logical sense. Like, there's like a one part of your brain that is afraid, and the other part of your brain is kind of looking at that half going, what? Why are you afraid of that? Right?
Yeah.
And that's kind of a phobia.
Yeah. My daughter has a fear of being thrown up on, which is, again, right, which she understands is like very unlikely. It's never happened to her, but it is a very unlikely thing. But she really is like, she can't like watch, a movie or a show where someone is throwing up. Like there's just this fear of vomiting and being vomited on that like really makes her feel scared. Like our dog, for example, can get car sick. And so if we're on a long trip and she's in the back of the car, like at some point my daughter will just like start crying because she's like so afraid that the dog is going to throw up near her or whatever. So then, we have to deal with that. But yeah. And she knows, to your point, she's like, I don't know, this doesn't make sense to me, but I am afraid of it. Yeah.
No, fair. I mean, fair. I think it's just good to know, like, just to be able to sort of put things in buckets to then have an understanding and insight, right? So there's a kind of the 3 types of fears. There are also some repetitive, common, like 5 common fears that are somewhat universal, like part of the human, very much part of the human experience. I want to go through them, and I want to kind of, most of them show up in our relationships. I want to actually also talk about them in the context of relationships. This is because this is what we always talk about. The first one is fear of abandonment, which is actually a very universal experience. Pretty much all humans feel it, some more than others. And I think it's probably the most potent fear that we have in relationships. So that somebody's going to leave us, that our partner is going to leave us.
We'll be all alone.
We'll be all alone. Yeah. Exactly. And it comes from the fact that we are born. I say this on the show all the time. Humans are born 100% dependent with zero boundaries. We know that when we're born, that for us to survive, we need to be taken care of. That is the only way that we can survive. So, idea of being abandoned equates to death. So we are all on some level experience a fear of abandonment. The other one is actually a very real fear of loss of identity. And that has a feeling of engulfment within the relationship, that we feel that either I'm nobody without this relationship, or I don't get to be who I am in this relationship. Like I'm going to mold into the relationship, and there is no part of me that's separate and individual that I can identify with and feel whole. So that's a real, and it's also called like fear of engulfment within the relationship. The other one is loss of meaning, like fearing a loss of meaning. And I think within the context of our relationships, it means like our relationship doesn't mean anything to you. The relationship or I don't have value. I think that's how it manifests in relationships. The other one is loss of purpose, right? And I think that within the context of a relationship manifests as like what I do doesn't matter. Yeah. And that you're kind of, you don't serve any purpose within the relationship. You're not needed. Right? People who are like, I need to be needed. I want to be needed. It gives them self-assurance. And I think loss of purpose is works around that. Like, I'm not going to be needed. I'm not going to have any use. I'm not going to be discarded. Right? That's kind of that loss of purpose. And fear of death. Right? We are all afraid of death. And in the context of relationship, I think it really is more about suffering. You're going to be suffering within a relationship, right? Because the fear of death includes fear of sickness and pain and essentially suffering. And I think it's the kind of fear of like, if I'm going to suffer in this relationship forever, is an irrational fear of mine, for example, that I own. So that's kind of how these like common fears, and I'm sure everybody who's listening, they can be like, oh yeah, like I get it. Right?
No, I totally can imagine and have experienced that kind of from the outside, like what those things feel like. I'm wondering what's happening on the inside then, right? So like on the outside, that makes sense to me. I can think about actual scenarios. What is happening in my brain in those moments when those things are happening, or when those fears are coming up? Yeah,
actually, fear is so primal that what's happening in our bodies are also really primal. we sense something through our senses. So we hear something, we see something, we smell something. So one of our senses pick up something that we perceive as danger. And then our thalamus, the part of our brain, sends a signal to our amygdala, which is the primal reptile brain, which activates a survival protocol. It's kind of very simple, very archaic model. And then once our reptile brain is in charge, you're actually bypassing the frontal lobe, which is where reason and sort of time and solutions live. So you're going from the thalamus straight to the amygdala and then activate protocol. Like once the survival protocol is activated, you're going into fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? So, and we're doing things like breathing heavier so our body gets more oxygen, our heart's beating faster, so there's more blood going into extremities so we can run. There's some like interesting things happen. Our limbs get weak, like our knees get weak, right? And that was preparing us first to play dead, right? The freeze response, right? So you can truly come across as dead, which I think is super interesting. And these are kind of the physical manifestations. We also have emotional protocols that kick in once we're afraid. And that's kind of what we call activation. And we talk about this a lot on the podcast, but we did a whole episode on this, episode 129. So if you're interested in like kind of the emotional survival protocols, I recommend that you jump onto that episode after this one. And then the other thing to mention about fear is you don't like being scared. I don't like being scared. But there are people who love being scared. They're the ones that are like binge watching horror movies. They're the ones that are like running to the front of the line for the House of Horrors. They're the ones like traveling the world, finding the scariest roller coasters and like being the first one on them at the front, the scariest part of it, whatever it is, right? So we call those people thrill seekers. And we know that for some people that actually feels good because you get dopamine hits when you're thrill seeking. And we know that dopamine is delicious and we love it and our brains love it. So some people are actually like seeking that experience. So even though we might think those people are crazy, like, well, crazy people, there are things we can learn from them, which is especially those people who do things like extreme sports or do the roller coasters and things like that. They actually push through their fear. And they adapt to it, right? They it's not that they're not scared. They are scared because it is that being scared is giving them the thrill. Yeah. And how they engage with it is by exposing themselves over and over again. And through that, they adapt to the fear, right? So if you're an extreme sports athlete, you need to enjoy the fear while you stay in your body and move the way you need to over obstacles or whatever you're doing. And you do that by making sure that your biology is used to the fear. Yeah. And if you're doing it really well, that you equate it with pleasure. Like you rewire yourself that you like, oh, that delicious dopamine hit is worth it. Yeah. Yeah. And as you get better, you know that you're not going to die and your skills get better and you're in this awesome space. And I think there's something that we can learn about that in the context of our relationships. The things that scare us in our relationships, we can get away from them. But can we stay with them, stick with them, get through them, and maybe they're not so scared anymore, and we can make different decisions that give us more pleasure in our relationships?
Yeah, I mean that's the focus for today, right? Is relationship fear, and not the fear of being in an abusive relationship. So if you're experiencing that kind of fear, please contact someone who can offer you guidance and support. Instead, we're talking about the emotional fears that we have, fearing being cheated on or abandoned or lied to or ignored or used or, any of those types of things, that kind of emotional reaction that we're having.
Exactly. So the thing to know is, remember we talked about the very simple system, thalamus, like we perceive something, our thalamus sends a message to the amygdala, and then we're scared, right? When we go into a survival protocol. In the relationships, we can sometimes do that through seeing something that activates, seeing or hearing something that activates a story, which we then holding on to, which then activates the thalamus into the amygdala and then into a fear response. So sometimes what's scaring us is not what we perceive, but the story that we're holding on to, which that our perception activates, right? So there's an opportunity there to address these stories. And sometimes if we can, to let go of them. And when we let go of those stories, there is no stimulus anymore. Right? And we don't go into fight or flight. And I think that's an important piece to learn here.
Yeah. It reminds me of, if you ever think of a joke in your head and you're like laughing and there's no external reason why you should be laughing and someone's looking at you like, what are you laughing at? Or what's going on? Or you start to move in your body because you're like hearing a song in your mind. Like those are physical reactions to a thing that's happening inside of your brain. And similarly, like you can think of my partner's going to cheat on me or leave me or something and physically then feel afraid. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So after all of this talk about fear and Halloween, I want to invite us all to travel together through our collective relationship house of horrors. Jacqueline and I will interweave our stories as well, along with our followers, to explore our deepest relationship fears. Let's hope that we all make it out alive.
Good evening, dear listeners. Tonight, on this special Halloween edition, we take you on a journey not of the body, but of the heart and soul. A journey through the corridors of our deepest relationship fears. So gather around your radios, dim the lights, and let your imagination take flight. Imagine, if you will, a moonlit night. The sky is clouded and the wind carries whispers of forgotten tales. And as you walk down the desolate path, a silhouette of an old abandoned mansion looms ahead, its once grand facade now weathered by time and neglect. A faded sign hangs crooked by the entrance reading "The Relationship House of Horrors," and curiosity tugs at you, urging you to go closer. With each step, the weight of countless stories of heartbreak and betrayal press down on you. The mansion's windows, though shattered and boarded, seem to watch you, as if it's been awaiting your arrival. You reach the grand entrance. The massive wooden doors, weathered and worn, stand defiantly, and you can't help but wonder what lies beyond them. With a deep breath, you muster the courage to push through them. A gust of cold air greets you, carrying with it the faint scent of old memories and whispered secrets. And as you step inside, you realize that each room in this mansion represents a different relationship fear. From betrayal to abandonment, from deceit to indifference, each room holds a story, a lesson, a warning. Are you ready, dear listener, to explore the rooms of the relationship house of horrors, to face the fears that lurk in the shadows of our heart? Join us as we delve into the mysteries of love, trust, and the ghosts of relationship past.
My personal house of horrors begins and kind of has this thematic play throughout with a beautiful facade. It's this gorgeous house. It's all rainbows and butterflies. It's very queer, and it's so inviting. But when I walk in, I'm immediately greeted with a room full of masks. And some of them are horrifying, and some of them are beautiful. Some of them I want to put on, other ones I want to run away from. But all of the beautiful ones, all of the ones that I try on and they seem to fit me, they immediately turn on me. And they show me a side of myself that is anything but what fits in that mask. And I begin to realize that these masks are representing imposter syndrome, representing my insecurity in my queerness, in other places that I show up, where I may be the minority in those spaces. And I'm afraid I'm invading because I'm the white cis guy showing up. And even though I'm queer, and even though I'm supportive, and even though I'm inclusive, and even though I have partners of every possible gender imagination, I'm never convinced that I am who I actually am. And these masks are just pulling that out of me. And it's absolutely terrifying because I want to be that person, and I want to own my truest belief, and I want to shine in that. And truthfully, most people around me tell me I do, but these masks remind me that I'm constantly in a state of imposter syndrome.
I enter a room and immediately grasp the hand of my partner, who I notice is standing next to me, looking away from me. As my eyes adjust to the lighting in the room, I notice it's covered with mirrors. I examine my reflection on each mirror, and I realize they are all distorted images of me. Some are long and thin, some are shattered, some have paintings on them that make me appear in certain outfits. I can't find a single mirror that reflects the real me back to me. Try to find myself in each mirror, but none of them is me. I look at my partner and I notice him looking at these mirrors and interacting with the certain reflections and ignoring some. I notice I cling onto his hand even more. The need to feel him grows bigger in my stomach. It feels almost like compulsion. I start to try to see which reflections he likes and focus on them myself. Our connection seems to be only through these reflections that don't feel like me, but it feels like I can't let him go either. I fear needing someone in a way that's almost like an addiction, where I will do anything to keep them, even though it may mean I lose a sense of who I am and do things that pleases them only. This addiction feeling is terrifying. Back in the room, I notice I've been focusing on these distortions for so long. I can't remember what I look like. I feel disconnected from myself. I don't even remember what I used to like, what used to make me me. I notice the grip I have on my partner and how the idea of letting go feels so frightening, gives me anxiety. Biggest depression comes back to me. I can only see black now. Then I take a deep breath. I close my eyes, put my hands into my heart, and I let go of his hand. It feels like jumping out of a plane. I feel the rush of panic all over my body. I let it pass, knowing that it will end. I keep breathing deeply. And once I feel calm, I open my eyes. And I start smashing all the mirrors with the tiny bit of strength I find in myself. Once all the mirrors are in pieces, I start to run my hands all over my body, gently, with compassion and care. From head to toe, I scan my body. I try to remember all the curves and bends. I start to remember what I look like, what I feel like. I reconnect with how it feels like to be me, rather than what the other person thinks of me or wants me to be. I find my way back to myself, and I realize I don't even need a mirror because I know and love who I am from inside and out. Now I have the courage to look into my eyes inside the mirror one more time again. And I love what I see. I see beauty. I see strength. I see courage. And even though it will take lots of time to rebuild myself, I know deep inside I can see my soul, and I'm loved, and I'm cared, and I'm worthy.
Upon entering the room, the door slams loudly behind me. The room is dimly lit and empty. My eyes start to search for the exit door. I can't seem to find it. But I don't see any obstacles in the way. There's a sense of ease that you wouldn't expect in a house of horrors. I take that ease as a sign and start to move to the middle of the room. As I do, I start to hear whispers. It's hard to make out what they're saying, but they are very present. The sense of ease starts to dissipate, and the voices are getting louder and angrier. They're coming from all around and saying mean things, harsh criticisms and words of disappointment and shaming. They're loud. The sense of ease is gone. It's a fast change. I'm in the middle of the room now, and I'm surrounded by angry, yelling, persistent, unkind comments. I wish I never walked into the middle of the room. I can't see a way out, and the voices won't stop. I'm in a panic. The aggression I'm surrounded with causes confusion and disorientation. I can't even remember that I'm in a room. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't even know I'm supposed to be looking for a way out. I'm consumed by the voices. And I can't hear myself think. I can't find words. I'm in complete disarray, and I slump down to the ground, defeated. I'm afraid. I'm afraid to be stuck in a relationship with a partner who can't control their anger and is unkind to me during their haze of rage. I worry that I'm going to be lulled into a sense of safety in a relationship which is going to quickly change and escalate. This fear keeps me from getting closer to people. Any sign of anger feels like a precursor to explosion of aggression and mean behavior. I can't imagine a healthy, safe way to witness someone's anger or frustration. Back in the room, amidst the shouting and the hostility, I find a moment of clarity in a deep breath. I get back on my feet and search for words. The voices are loud, but I know that I just need to find my words and express myself. I say, stop. This is not acceptable. Please don't shout at me and don't be mean. I say, you can be angry. You can even be angry with me, but you can't be angry at me. I will hear you if you stop shouting at me. As I speak words clearly and firmly, the voices start to subdue. I can hear them now. I can make out what they're saying. I can hear a frustrated child, a tone of sadness, deep shame. The voices aren't hostile anymore. They become clearer and calmer. I find myself willing and able to listen and engage with them. It's not so scary anymore. I sit back on the ground and listen to the stories, the worries that are coming to me in my partner's voice. I feel closer to them. Eventually, the voice expresses remorse and gratitude. And I hear it click across from me as the door opens for me to get through.
I enter a dark room, and the door shuts behind me. I can see my partner across. I start to move towards her, but the floor is made of sand. The sand is making it difficult to walk. I finally reach the middle of the room. I see that there is a big trench. I almost fall in. I use the light on my phone to look down the trench, hoping that I can climb down, but the walls of the trench are covered in spikes. The only way I can get across is to fill it. All I see is a plastic spoon on the ground. I pick it up and use it to start scooping sand into the trench. As expected, it's not working very well. My partner is too far away to see what is going on, so she keeps calling out to me. I'm worried she is getting frustrated and that she's not going to wait for me and will leave me in this dark, sand-filled room. I'm ill-equipped. The spoon isn't working. She will leave because I don't have what it takes to meet her where she's at. It's not my fault. All I have is a spoon. I'm in my worst fear. I feel a sinking feeling in my stomach. I feel good about myself on my own. I'm whole and enough. But when I'm in a relationship, I fear that what makes me feel enough is not what my partner needs to feel satisfied. And she will want something that I can't provide. That the love we share is conditional. I'm about to give up and let her go and just let myself sink into the sand. Through tears and with the spoon in my hand, I muster up the courage to yell at her and say, I don't have the right tools to fill the gap between us. She leaves. It's me, my spoon, and this dark sand-filled room. I curse at the spoon and fling it aside. I feel so defeated. But moments later, she comes back with buckets and shovels that she has collected over time from other people in her life. We both start working together to move the sand to the bottom of the trench. Finally, it's filled enough that I am able to make it across to the other side. We hug and kiss, and I remember that I don't need to be the only resource to meet my partner's needs. I don't have to be her everything, and I don't need to be in competition with other people in her life because they provide different things that I can. I am lovable just as I am, and our connection and what I provide to her and the relationship is unique. As we exit the room, I look and I see the spoon on the ground. I walk back to pick it up and I put it in my pocket. My partner sees this and says, that spoon's useless. Why do you even want it? I say just because it wasn't useful now doesn't mean that it won't be useful later.
House of Horrors, a fear of financial dependence. As I step into the room, the floor falls from underneath me. I find myself sinking into a quicksand made of mud. Very quickly, I'm stuck halfway in. I realize I can't get out of this mess alone. I'm going to drown. I panic and look for how I can survive. Then I see my partner above on a scaffold, reaching a hand down at me. I grasp it in desperation. Her hand is the only thing stopping me from sinking deeper into the pit. I feel trapped. Voices in my head tell me to release her hand, as it will be impossible to ever stand up or speak for myself if she's the only way I don't drown. But I can feel the sinking money pit pulling me down, and I don't want to drown. My heart sinks, thinking I might not be able to take care of our future family. I'm filled with fear. What if someday she decides I'm not enough and let go of my hand? What if I have to conform or comply or abandon who I am so she doesn't let go of my hand? The thought leaves me imagining a lonely world with nothing and no one by my side, without a sense of who I am. I begin to feel angry towards her, as if she's already abandoning me or forcing me to abandon myself. Her hand feels like a trap rather than a support. I take a deep breath and calm myself. This change allows me to shift the way I think about my partner. I'm reminded of how much I love her. I choose to believe she's here to support me and that we are a team. With her support, I pull myself up and out of the money pit. I feel stable with my feet on solid ground. She gently lets go of my hand. I feel separate from her long enough to feel myself fully and see her fully. Side by side, eye to eye, on equal footing. As we exit the room, hand in hand once again, I understand better. Our relationship is about supporting each other, not controlling.
I walk into a room that looks exactly like my house. I step inside and I see my wife on the other end of the house, and I call out to her. It looks like she looks at me, but then she just turns and leaves. And as I start to walk towards her, I almost bump into the coffee table, but instead, I just walk right through it. I realize as I feel around that the furniture and everything around the house is a hologram. I can see it, but I can't touch it because it's not really there. I dash across the room and I run to the back door where my wife exited, and I call out to her, but as I reach for the door, I discover that it too is just a hologram and there is nothing there for me to open. As I turn back around to look at the space, the room gets dark. The furniture and the things around the house begin to fade into darkness, and then, almost as if they're projectors that are turned on around the room, I begin to see these soundless images and videos on the wall. I see an alternative life where my house is sold and all of our belongings are sent away. I see my daughter crying and hugging her friends and saying goodbye. I see my daughter and I going from place to place, trying to find a place to stay. I see us begging on the streets for money and food. And I feel an overwhelming sense of dread. This is one of my worst fears, that my wife will leave me. And as a result, my daughter and I will no longer have the life that we've all built together. And that all that we have created will disappear. And that my daughter and I will have to leave the neighborhood that we love, and somehow we will run out of money and resources and have to beg, borrow, and steal in order to survive. I feel immediate heartbreak and terror at the idea of that loss. So I close my eyes real tight so I can no longer be exposed to those flashing images. I take a deep breath and I quiet my mind. And then I remember who the fuck I am. I open my eyes and I see images across the walls of me in a job that I love, co-hosting a podcast that I love. I see images of my daughter and I laughing and celebrating and dancing, and a future that looks clear and bright and joyful and full. And I'm reminded of my current success and the people and resources and support that are available to me. And the more that I remember who I am and I think about the future that I am able to create, light begins to re-enter the room. And I can see my furniture and the things around my house again. But this time, they're no longer holograms. I can reach out and feel and touch them because they are real. And I begin to feel the joy and reassurance that whether or not my relationship with my wife lasts forever or one day ends, that I will be okay. That we will be okay. And as I walk around the room, feeling a sense of relief, my wife comes back through the door and she sees me, and I feel immediate elation and gratitude that I don't need her here in order to have this life. But she brings added value, delight, comfort, and love into my life.
Yay! We did it, everyone. We made it.
Oh my God, that was scary.
Scary.
Well
and
done.
So creative.
Yes, it's true. And a little sad. Someone made me sad and scared and all the things.
Yeah.
Well done. Thank you for everyone who shared stories. That was really wonderful.
A massive thank you. Because here's the thing. In making this episode, we had the opportunity to work with people one-on-one to help them develop their stories, their rooms in the House of Horrors, if you will. And we really sort of came about this thinking we're going to make a really cool episode and we're going to get to connect with our listeners. The thing is, we got really interesting feedback. Everybody we worked with told us that it was a transformative experience. So we encourage you, dear listener, to try this for yourself. And to help you do that, we came up with a framework so you can come up with your own room. And here's how it goes. So first of all, answer this question. What are you afraid of? Is it being abandoned, about losing yourself, or being trapped in a relationship? So think about the things that we talked about at the top of this episode and write down, what are you afraid of? What is that core fear for you? This will give you the theme for the room. Next, what is the scenario that illustrates that fear, right? Like, my partner will meet someone else better than me and leave. My partner and children will need so much of me that I will lose myself. That non-monogamy is not an option, and my partner is not interested in the sex that I want, and I will never get sex again. Like, what is that story that is feeding that fear? This will give you the context for the room. Next, I want you to imagine a physical experience that can describe or conjure up that fear, that specific fear for you. Think of it as a verb. So things like falling and sinking and walking on a tightrope, jumping from rock to rock over lava, being pulled in all the directions, shrinking, hanging off the sides of a cliff. Like, just think of it as a physical manifestation of the feeling that you're experiencing. This will give you the movement in the room. That will also help the listeners to emphasize with your exact type of fear. Once you've done that, for the last piece, imagine what helps you feel better. Is it concentrating on all the unique things you bring to a relationship? Asking your partner for validation when you feel insecure? Is it creating guilt-free space to be your own, doing something that you enjoy? Think about the thing that is going to make you feel better. And this will help you formulate a way out of the room. And once you have all this down, sit down and imagine your room from beginning all the way to the end, and let us know if it's as transformative as it has been for everybody else we worked with.
We have included those questions and those prompts in our show notes.
And, of course, by all means, write your stories yourself. But we did find this exercise to be so powerful that we actually want to facilitate a workshop where we can support whoever wants to come up with their own rooms and find their way out. And if you're interested in doing that, the best way to set yourself up for that is to go to our Instagram at We Are Curious Foxes. If you're not following us, please do follow us. And then send us a DM that says House of Horrors. That's all you need to write, House of Horrors, and we will get back to you with details.
So try it. And then also go to our Facebook group at We Are Curious Foxes and tell us about the experience, or even share your story if you feel so inclined. You can jump on our Instagram. You can go onto our website at We Are Curious Foxes. And there on our website, you can find episodes and blog posts and resources on related topics, all under the umbrella of love, sex, and relationships. If you want some more of Effy and I, some more of our guests, then you got to go to Patreon. Again, at We Are Curious Foxes. There are going to be bonus cuts and mini episodes. And we have online workshops for when we were in person and doing online workshops. All of those things, over 50 different workshops are there and available to you on Patreon. And we would love for you to share this episode with somebody. Send it to them for Halloween. Send it to them if you think that they would enjoy being a part of the workshop. Please send this, save this, star this, rate this, comment on this, do all of the things that are possible. It really does mean a lot to us. It'll take you a few minutes, but it's important for us, and it's important for the podcast algorithm to decide whether or not it's going to recommend our show to others. And finally, if you have questions, if you have a story that you want to share, if you want to just let us know what this episode has meant for you or what creative ideas that you came up with, then send us an email or a voice memo to listening@wearecuriousfoxes.com.
This episode is produced by Effy Blue and Jacqueline Missler, with help from Yamur Erkishe. Our editor is Nina Pollock, who turns the process of creating a weekly podcast from fright into delight. Our intro music is composed by Dev Saha. We are so grateful for their work, and we're grateful to you for listening. As always, stay curious, friends. Curious Fox Podcast is not and will never be the final word on any topic. We solely aim to encourage curiosity and provide a space for exploration through connection and story. We encourage you to listen with an open and curious mind, and we'll look forward to your feedback. Stay curious, friends.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay curious.